Good evening, afternoon, night, morning, whenever you find a way to watch or listen to this podcast. It is me, Omar Rashan Borja, the Burger Popper, joining two gentlemen that I've had on before, a couple times before, I believe, for another Army themed podcast. I know I cover all college football. I like to fashion myself as a college football writer and podcaster who just happened to go to Army. But today, we're talking about matters with my alma mater and everything as the season approaches closer. And as I see, I guess the things that I'd like to cover, we have enough topics to talk about because everyone's talking about the option scheme, moving to the American, which we'll cover a little bit here, but with a kind of secondary slash tertiary effect of joining the American. But joining me, we have Cuthbert of SSN Army, and we have Brendan in Jersey. Gentlemen, how are we all doing? It's great to be back with you guys talking about Army football. It's talking, before the season, so close to the season starting.
It's a fantastic day. Every day is a great day to talk Army football. The season cannot get here soon enough, and I'm just so pumped to be back here with you, Omar. Brandon, is you as well, and the sartorial resplendence between the Rock of the Marne, the 2013, and then of course my trusty Army cap. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I can't believe we're less than 50 days till kickoff. It blows my mind. And I don't know. I got plenty of fun stuff in the meantime, so I don't want the time to go too quickly, but at the same time, I'm really excited to see what happens this season.
Likewise, I mean the schedule's favorable. I'm excited. The Cornacchia Bowls. I'm just hoping for a 6-6 year at the very least. Maybe I'm setting my standards too low, but 6-6 and a trip to Shreveport. Who knew? That's a tongue twister. Trip to Shreveport. That's enough to me. That's a good enough Christmas gift for me. But we'll talk about Independence Bowl and all that stuff later on. For now, I think the big thing, of course, like this is kind of a new era of Army football where I guess most of our kickoff times are, I guess not kickoff times, but network designations are known before the season with us. Of course, keeping the CBS Sports Network deal, but of course, being part of a conference where we're not at the mercy of the 12-day selections, really, for the most part. So that leaves, I think about like 9 or 10 kickoff times are already determined. I mean, including the Air Force game, which of course on CBS, and a couple others. So I think the biggest thing, of course, like we knew we were gonna play Temple on a Thursday night, which is cool. A little bit of weeknight revenge. Well, actually, we already got weeknight revenge in 2016. I was gonna mention the 2008 game, which I'm sure a lot of Army fans haven't thought about in a while. But we already knew we were gonna play Temple on a Thursday night. I think the biggest surprise of the network announcements was a little bit of trading action, which it's kind of fitting with it being 2 weeks from the MLB trade deadline. You had CBS Sports Network and ESPN essentially trade games, cut a backroom deal, excuse me, where CBS Sports Network will have the pleasure of carrying Army's first game in the American on September 7th against Florida Atlantic. I know that they'll probably put some promotional juices into that, especially into the intro. I mean, they had a cool intro for Army Boston College of all games. And of course, with that trade comes East Carolina playing Army at noon on an ESPN network. So, gentlemen, how do we feel? I know we've all gotten used to CBS Sports Network's care with the presentation of Army football and Navy football on CBS Sports Network. How do we feel about ESPN hopping in to broadcast Army home games? Do you think they'll treat it with the due respect? Are we excited? How are we feeling?
Uh, I I'm fine with some Army games being on ESPN. I am a firm believer that the standard noon start Mikey game needs to be on CBS Sports. You alluded a moment ago to the care that CBS Sports takes in our intro packages, in the production, and that's something that's really valuable. I think there's value in having a home and having consistency of if it's a home game at Army, it's going to be a noon game. It's going to be on CBS Sports, even though that's considered a secondary channel. Apart from that, I'm fine with games on ESPN. Thursday night, Friday night, away games, night games, things like that. More eyes, the better. So long as it's not ESPN Plus, I've no problem with it at all being on ESPN. I don't think they're probably going to put in the pomp and circumstance. They might sort of lead people to believe they will. I don't really think that they will. I think in the end, it'll just be another game. But, it's more eyes and more exposure, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, suffice it to say, CBS has been very good to Army for I think over 10 seasons now. It's hard to believe how long that contract has gone on and been consistently renewed. And obviously, both sides are very happy with it. But Army on ESPN just takes me back to kind of the days, like my younger days, certainly, because before CBS, the first national TV contract that I can remember that Army had was with ESPN. I don't think they. I think maybe once did they ever play on like the big four-letter network. I know they were on ESPN2 a few times, but mostly it was like ESPN Classic and ESPNU, which is fine. I mean, if you had a decent enough cable package back in the day, or if your college did, in my case back in the day, you could see just about every game with little problem. The biggest. I'm sure the biggest thing will be people wary of getting away from our quote unquote home announcers, who some people criticize enough as it is. I think I think even sadly moving away from Ben Holden the past couple of years, I think CBS has done a fine job with the getting consistent play-by-play guys in the booth. But yeah, I mean, you always worry a bit when you wander from home that they're not going to get the particulars of the offense right, or pronunciations and all that. But I don't know. I mean, Army Temple on a Thursday night on the four-letter network. That's I think that, man, is that the first Thursday night game since 1999? I can't remember. But that'll I don't know. If nothing else, that'll be the one game I attend this season, because getting in and out of the link is nice and easy. But anyway,
Yeah, I agree with your points, gentlemen, on both sides. I think Army Temple on a Thursday night just screams Big East. Of course, Temple being in the Big East, and I mean, it's like different eras of the Big East melding together. Like Temple's hapless years in the Big East, and of course, the Renaissance when I was first watching college football, the Pat White days, the Ray Rice, Brian Brom, those Thursday night Big East games. So, if I squint hard enough and I imagine enough, Army is finally part of the Big East like I wanted them to be as a kid with that Thursday night game. I guess another point I want to bring up with the broadcast is, of course, we have a sort of sample size with Navy where it's like Navy has shown that ESPN having the rights to their games can go one of two ways, where it's like ESPN puts, I guess, like bargains big and bids big for one of Navy's conference home games like they did in 2021. Of course, there's added context where Cincinnati was ranked number 2 in the AP poll, visited Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium, which like that game was a pretty forgotten game. I mean, Navy recovered an onside kick in the last minute and nearly brought Cincinnati to overtime. I think people forget that in Cincinnati's 2021 playoff journey. But I guess the thing that I focus on, the announcers, like you had Dave Fleming calling a game at Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium. Of course, Dave Fleming, one of the key voices of the Pac-12 over the years, the Pac-12 After Dark. I mean, very recognizable voice, the TV voice of we'll say New York Giants, like it's the 1950s, the San Francisco Giants baseball team. Really recognizable voice. But it can go the other way, where I guess Army's game on ESPN could be an afterthought, like this most recent, I guess Army's American Conference game on ESPN, should say, could be an afterthought, like last year's Navy East Carolina game, where that game they didn't have a network partner until 12 days before, and it was such an afterthought. Of course, you had, I think Navy at that point was 4-5 going to that game. East Carolina, I think like 2-8 or something like that. That game ended up being on ESPN Plus, and I had joked around with some of my some of my Navy, maybe they're friends to me. I don't know if they're friends to you guys. Some of my Navy friends just talking about how, wow, Navy had a game broadcast on the same network as the World XL Championships. Like, but that doesn't scream big time to me. But that could be us. That very well could be us given the circumstances, since we're not a primary partner of ESPN. And then Brandon, with your point on the broadcast teams, I'll be honest, I like Chris Lewis a lot. He is a young rising talent in the game. I want him calling all of our Army home games. He brings that sort of flair and excitement, I think, that Ben Holden brought. but in a kind of a youthful way. So I mean, I've listened to a lot of his calls, but I guess just thought the announcers, like you said, like we've done a great job with like just balancing the announcers. Even getting Dave Ryan, one of the CBS Sports Network's more established voices on the home game. So I mean, you can't go wrong with Lewis or Ryan. Um, and of course Ross Tucker. Ross Tucker is always there to stay. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the broadcast.
Just to throw in one additional point about the broadcast teams. It's difficult enough to watch an Army game when it happens to be shuffled around to someplace like the NFL Network, but then to have a broadcaster who is at the same time like making jokes and clearly not understanding the Army offense. And I get it. These guys, they do, some of them do more than one game a week and they're flying all over the country and they're looking at teams. And I'm not expecting them to have an encyclopedic knowledge of it, but there are some basics that somebody could sit down and in 30 or 45 minutes prep a play-by-play guy to understand basic concepts, what different positions are called and what different formations are called and what the target is of things, and maybe not to be making so many jokes and things like that. I think that goes back to the care that CBS Sports takes in presenting the Army games, which I think is just fantastic. And, look, if we want to be a big time team, we're going to have to play on 4-letter stations and places like that, and maybe even on network TV at some point. And, I mean, we're going to this year with Notre Dame, and that's going to be fantastic. But, there's something about CBS Sports. It's our home. And I think that as much as we would like to tell ourselves we are like every other college football team we're the same kind of fan base, we're not. And I think that CBS Sports fits us so perfectly.
All right, I think we hit that point home. I really like that point, Cuthbert, about just it being our home. And Brandon, you said it's been 10 years. It's been like 15 years. I think this is our 16th season on the CBS Sports Network, which is crazy to think about, dating back to Trent Steelman's freshman year, plebe year, of course. To I guess our fan base is freshman to the casual audience that I guess I have, the non-Army fan audience. But yeah, it's just crazy how long that partnership has lasted. Same thing with Navy. Like Navy's even before that. I think Navy's entering their 20th year. But they've been on, CBS Sports Network when it was called CSTV, which is pretty crazy. But it's a whole new service academies. So going on to our next topic, talking about the postseason, of course, my favorite topic, I think, out of the list that we're discussing is the Independence Bowl, which the Ask for Football, our great friends at Ask for Football, had mentioned in their podcast with athletic director Mike Buddy. He had mentioned that Army would vow to honor the Independence Bowl tie-in this year should they be bowl eligible, which is a very honorable thing. And I think it's great for both parties, considering that Army, of course, notably was the first team to accept a bowl bid during the doomed pandemic season. But the whirlwind of things happening when Oregon upset USC, suddenly all the Pac-12 teams decided they're too cool for bowls, too cool for the casinos of Shreveport, Louisiana, and we had no one to play. And then 2022, of course, we went 6-6 with 2 FCS wins. So this is really our last shot at Shreveport. I mean, it's a stuff of 30 for 30s. But gentlemen, how are we feeling about being essentially locked in? I'd say we're probably about like 70-80% locked in, because the Independence Bowl is keeping hush hush about it. I tried to see if they'd fold their hand with their latest press release about the Pac-12 playing in the Independence Bowl, but they didn't tip their hands one bit in the press release. So they're playing very coy. How do you feel about just being locked into Shreveport instead of testing the waters with the Americans' other bowl games?
I think it's the right move. We signed a contract saying that we would go to the Independence Bowl this year if we were bowl eligible. I think the fact that we're doing that is fantastic. I mean, I know we're joining the American, but the fact that we're not cutting and running, I mean, what is it really worth? I don't know, a pile of beans in moral efficacy, but I think that's not a bad thing. And I'm very vocal about the fact that I'm eager to get away from things like the Military Bowl and the Armed Forces Bowl. I feel like, granted, we're on a little bit of a bowl drought right now, but enough of those. So the fact that we're locked into something that's not the Armed Forces Bowl. I'm very excited about the payout for the Independence Bowl in 2023 was reported to be over $2 million. I think that's definitely a win. And per the Wikipedia page, take it for what it's worth, but per the Wikipedia page, the two remaining Pac-2 or two-pack teams, as well as the 10 legacy teams, are still on the hook to someone will be obligated to go to the game. So, it may end up being an Army Big 12, depending on what school goes. That might mean that we're getting the dregs, because if you just jumped conferences, you may be more interested in going to a new shiny bowl game affiliated with your new conference. But then again, money talks. And if you're talking about a $2 million payout, maybe the casinos of Shreveport are a little more inviting. But regardless, we will have a team that's either, in the Pac-2 or in a Power 5, a big payout and a new bowl for us. One last hurrah before we get into the grind of, the AAC obligations and who goes first and second and all of that. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I mean, so for those who don't know, I think it was after the 2018 season, Army signed a contract with ESPN for 6 years of essentially, uh, bowl games, assuming Army's eligibility, and the odd years were sort of like wherever ESPN could find a spot for them, and the even years were the Independence Bowl. And for the longest time, it's just looked like the Shreveport's like not going to happen, because in 2020, as you said, Omar, I mean, some people think like the Independence Bowl bailed on us. They did not bail on Army at all. I mean, they did everything they could to find an opponent, and nobody wanted to come out of the woodwork. And so I will always have a soft spot for West Virginia for having the cojones to play us in the postseason last year, and very nearly taking an L for that. So, but yeah, and then obviously 2022 Army was not bowl eligible. I think Army will be bowl eligible this season. And while Shreveport isn't necessarily the most high profile location, if they end up getting essentially a P4 now opponent, even if it is somebody way down the totem pole, that becomes a premier matchup. And we've seen, if Army can win those. I mean, I'll never forget the coverage that Army got after beating Missouri in 2021. I mean, you would have thought like the sky was on fire. They were getting so much free publicity from ESPN and all over. So yeah, I mean, certainly if obviously I don't want a total repeat of 2021, because I'd like for Army to win the CIC and the bowl, but if they can win, if they can earn and win a national spotlight game like that, as it were, then yeah, I mean, I really have no problems where the game is. As Joe Funkin says, you could hold it in a parking lot. We'll show up.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And it's like I kind of feel, Brandon, like with what you said about Army, Missouri. It's like when Army or Navy beats a Power 5 school, everyone feels like the good guys win. Even more so now with the blurring of the lines, college football and professional football. I think whenever Service Academy beats a Power 5 team, people feel good inside. Like I mean, if we're talking about bowl season, like they had a nice warm mug of hot chocolate, by the fire. Just it has that same feeling during bowl season whenever it happens. So with the Independence Bowl, I like it. I love the matchup. But the step in, put on my Cornacchia Bulls hat, just look at the Pac-12 bowl selection process for everyone out there. So the way it would go, of course, 12-team playoff, that gets the first dibs. There is no such thing as a New Year's Six. But after the 12-team playoff, the Pac-12 bowl selection process was Alamo, Las Vegas, Holiday, Sun Bowl, and then the Los Angeles Bowl. So those bowls get first. So do my funny thing with my fingers, right? So Cal, I guess if we're looking at the Independence Bowl, the only team that's really eliminated is Cal, but right off the bat. But if you look at it, USC is not going to be our opponent if they're bowl eligible because the other bowls, yeah, I mean, so the way I guess I should also further elaborate that the first three bowls, the Alamo, Las Vegas, and Holiday, they pick from a pool where it's like where it's I think it's everyone but the bottom three bowl teams are in this pool. Say I guess you can't pick a 5-3 conference team over a 7-2 team. So say Utah goes 7-2 and USC goes 5-3. You can't pick Utah or you can't pick USC, even though they're the more popular program. So probably confusing everyone in the audience already. But with that being said, so we're not going to play USC. We're not going to play Oregon. Probably not going to play UCLA, even though UCLA dropped down a bit. They played in the Los Angeles Bowl last year. So, I mean, that would be honestly a dream opponent in the Independence Bowl. I'd say we're definitely not going to play Colorado just because the media circus that they are. So I'd rule Colorado out. But with the remaining options of teams that have a down year, like Arizona, Arizona State, Stanford possibly, even though things look a little bit gloomy out there in Palo Alto. But I mean, I would love to get another shot at Stanford with our programs being so alike. Um, Arizona, I don't know if I said Arizona State or Arizona before, but honestly, I'd be happy with any of those matchups. We've never played Arizona or Arizona State. Utah, we played Utah once in the 60s, I think, and it was a pretty high scoring game for its day. But I gotta pull up Wikipedia really quick. Actually, we're 3-0 against Utah, and it was in got to nerd out. Yeah, 1957, we beat them 39-33. So if we play Utah at the Independence Bowl with their style of play, it's probably going to be a lower scoring game than that 57 game. But I'd be fine with a lot of the Pac-12 opponents.
Quick question. You said we beat them in 57?
Yes, we did.
I need to ask my dad. That was his senior year. He would have been at that game. He would have
I
been on
bet
the
he was.
field at that game.
Oh, okay.
But
Okay.
I will say this. Omar, you make a really, really good point. Something that we're going to be talking about in one of our later topics, which is P5 competition. And a point that I wanted to make that I'll go ahead and just make now is a, a high interest in finding new teams to play, especially from I guess now the Power Four. And so, the teams that you're rattling off in terms of, look, you're the Cornacchia Bulls. So if we've got a higher likelihood of seeing Arizona or Arizona State relative to Oregon State or Utah, that's fine. The long and the short is those are teams from a power conference. We've never seen them before. I say bring it on, all the better. I love playing smart guy schools. So Stanford would also be a dream. We have recent history with them. We played them, I think, within the last 10 years. We've had a home and home with them. But I would love to see some. I mean, I don't want to say middle of the road, as though I don't want to insult these other programs. I mean, come on, we're just Army, but these middle, sort of a little more middle of the road power programs, I would love to see some of them.
Yeah, I definitely do agree. I mean, just anyone like the new faces, which I think it's a great tie into our next topic, which I know, Brendan, that you are fired and riled up about, just us joining the American, and this is something that hits home. But I mean, I'm a glass half full guy about the non-conference schedule, and I guess I take it with a grain of salt, where we're seeing a lot of these group of five programs that we have had on the schedule excuse me, that we've had on the schedule us, not cancel the series, but just reschedule us for the future. I think the one that I was most interested in was the Middle Tennessee series, where Middle Tennessee was the opening game of my first senior year for my non-Army audience of my senior year at the academy, and then 11 years after my senior year, we'll be returning the favor, walking into Johnny Red Floyd Stadium out there in Murfreesboro, former home of the Grantland Rice Bowl. But but like it's interesting, and for me, I think it's kind of cool, right? We love the Power Five games, but it's nice to see that we're this national brand to a lot of group of fives. We're like, you know what? Like you join a conference, we still want to play you, even if it's 2037, like it's Buffalo. Like Buffalo rescheduled us for 2037 when I'll be 38. I can't even imagine that. I'll be 38 at that time. But yeah, like that. I mean, I think it's very great. Like, yes, we love the Power Five games, but I guess glass half full, the group of five loves Army, and it's great that someone views us as a national brand. That being said, these reschedulings have come at a sacrifice where we're overbooked in some years down the road still. And in a lot of years where we have our 4 conference games already, there are no Power Five games or there's no FCS games. So I want to ask you guys about the trade-off between playing group of five schools, other group of five schools at the, I guess, at the expense of these FCS games and the Power Five games.
Um, Personally, I don't have as much appetite for playing non-conference group of five schools. Um, Not that I'll never have an appetite for that, but we have spent the last 20 years playing group of five schools that weren't in our conference because we weren't in a conference. So no disrespect to the Sun Belt or the MAC or Conference USA, Mountain West. There's lots of great teams and we could have great games with them. But now that we're in a conference, I'm looking at 2024. We have all of our conference games. We've got Air Force out of conference, Navy out of conference. We've got a P5 and an FCS, and we still have 2 bye weeks. And I feel like this is threading the needle of, at least if for the time being, exactly what we need to be doing in terms of like how we should be scheduling. And 3, 4, 5, 8 years from now, like that, I will likely feel very differently. But as we get into the American, I think that we try and stick with that formula as long as we can.
Yeah, I mean, to me, uh, just looking at it from a pure recruiting perspective, Navy has their series with Notre Dame, and that's a consistent thing that they have, and so I do think it's important for Army to maintain a 1 game per year uh, P4 opponent as much as they can. Obviously, it's not going to. Obviously, especially with kind of like everything thrown up in the air for the next 10 years, with the American having to help Army buy out games and stuff like that. There's going to be years where they're just going to have to schedule who they can, and in that case, I'm happy to go to Buffalo or Coastal or Old Dominion or whoever. But I do think, generally speaking, we should be, especially now that we're locked into a conference and we only get 1 bite at the apple, unless you want to sacrifice an FCS warm up game, which I would prefer not to at the beginning of the season. Army's really, other than possibly a bowl game, Army's only going to get 1 bite at the P4 apple per season. So I do think it's important to maintain that as much as they can.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with the FCS because I, unlike a lot of the fan base, maybe not when I was a cadet, when there was other games in the region that I would have rather gone to and taken a weekend pass out to. I enjoy the Patriot League games. Like the Holy Cross game was great. It was great to revitalize that series with such legendary names like Gordy Lockbaum, Mike Mayweather, I believe, played against Holy Cross, and just you name it, right? All the great Army football names and Holy Cross names that come to mind when you think of Army versus Holy Cross. And I mean, same thing goes for like Lafayette, Colgate, Fordham, are all of our Patriot League brethren in the Olympic sports. I think it's great, the FCS games, honestly, as a fan. I think too, what you say about the warm-up games, like, I don't think we need a warm-up game because if we're considering ourselves to be in the best group of five conference, and we can't beat Old Dominion at, in Norfolk, then we might as well consider ourselves Virginia Tech. Sorry, I just want to throw that shade at Virginia Tech for losing it, losing at Old Dominion, twice. But I mean, all jokes aside, like I mean, I don't think we need a FCS game. Like it's nice to have that warm up. It's nice to have that sort of sweetheart deal with our Olympic brethren, where we stick out like it's like a sore thumb with like a sore thumb in the Patriot League. Like everyone else is a private university and we're a service academy. I mean, that's just how it is. But I mean, they just allow us in, and that's great. With the P4, the recruiting definitely takes a hit for sure. Um, And I mean, we will have our opportunities, and it is tough. It really is. But I just think it makes the bowl games more important, really. Where it's like if you think like for me, just being the history minded guy I am, like thinking about how special the 84 Cherry Bowl was, the 85 Peach Bowl, the 88 Sun Bowl, where it's like we're playing a schedule where with three FCS, sometimes four. I think the 88 schedule had four FCS teams, Division One AA teams, and at the end of the year, we
Yeah.
get to play a power conference team in a bowl game. I just think it makes the bowl games even more special, makes Shreveport more special, makes the military bowl even more special in the future, especially since we've been waiting since '09 to get to a military bowl. Makes the Fenway Bowl more special. You name it. I just think just playing in the conference and not having as many P5 opportunities makes the bowl as special. And as a defender of bowl games till the day I die, that is something I'm willing to live with. Army having less Power Five opportunities if the bowls are more special.
Well, I actually had I had a question I wanted to pose to the two of you, just out of curiosity. Shooting from the hip, sort of like uh, just just off the cuff. Any given season, you have a choice. Army is between a rock and a hard place. They either have to nix an FCS opponent or they have to nix a P4 opponent. They're both scheduled, and one of them has to go. You have to make a decision. Just on any, not talking about this year or last year, or if the team's really good or the team's really bad, just in general, which of those are you going to keep, the FCS or are you going to keep the Power Four?
I mean, in that would you rather situation, I'm definitely keeping the Power Four. Uh, I mean, just as a real world example, last year, and you never know really what's going to happen. You never know the butterfly effect of certain things, but had Delaware State come before Louisiana Monroe, maybe last year goes a lot better. Maybe this season, or maybe this past off season looks different. Uh, so yeah, I mean, I don't I don't cry if Army doesn't go to a bowl if they can't beat, Louisiana Monroe in week one. But at the same time, it's like, not to get too off track from your hypothetical, but I would like to keep those quote unquote warm up games as much as we can, because some off seasons are a lot more topsy turvy than others, and sometimes you just need a little more runway um, going into other seasons than others. But Omar, what's your take on this hypothetical?
I'm keeping the power unless it's against VMI or Citadel where there's actually great pageantry or against Ivy League school. I'm keeping the Power Four game because those games contribute to national relevance. And it's like, and I guess I'm like more inclined, like I guess from my perspective too, where it's like I'm looking at in the future going to Army games like Power Four games where it's like, okay, like I'm not as excited about like Army Kansas State. Like, yeah, Kansas State's Kansas State, but if like you're telling me, okay, we can either keep Lafayette or we can keep Syracuse, Duke, Wake Forest, Boston College, our academic peers, schools that we would be great in a Northeast conference with, like I'm keeping those mid-Atlantic Northeastern schools because it's like that is taking us back to our roots. It's not even about like the national, like yes, we're playing the big boys, but it's just about taking us back to our roots and everything. Like you look at, I guess going back in history, you look at like the 95 team, right? Like that team was solid, but I think it was their win over Boston College that kind of showed potential. 49-7 against Tim Hasselbeck, quarterback Boston College. I remember that because of a Civil War. John Feinstein read it twice in my life, but
Yeah,
like 49-7 win against like Boston College, like that like shows like, it's a special moment in that series because it's time test and showed what the 96 team was capable of, looking ahead. So I'm keeping the Power Four game. Like I know, like I'm kind of like, you know, lukewarm right now on my take. Like, I find I find the benefits of each game we play. Like Marist, looks like we're gonna play Marist next year. But it's like, you know what? That's great. This is great for the Hudson Valley. Let's do it. I don't care that they're a Pioneer Football League team and typically and that probably will not count for us unless we get a waiver for towards the bowl eligibility, but let's do it, right? I'm a glass half full guy, but it's like for me, it's like I want the Power Four game.
That's incredible. You both of you guys, fantastic answers. You totally have me rethinking what I had mapped out earlier. You know, I'm going in the opposite direction. I mean, now not quite as strongly as I was because you all made some fantastic points. I mean, the FCS game, it's typically it's a game, obviously, it gives us a little more practice, which is fantastic. Like you said, Brandon, if we do that before ULM, maybe the season turns out very differently. Maybe our coaching staff right now looks very different. Maybe all the conversations we're having are different. But when we're playing those FCS teams, by and large, it's a close proximity, which is good. I mean, it's an easy trip. It's not easy to be a cadet. It's not easy to play Division I football. And then, you know, especially with some of like those a team like a Holy Cross, or there is some history there. There is something. And then also, Omar, you've made the point in the past about the academy reach and about not just recruiting for the football team, but recruiting for the officer corps. And sometimes reaching out to an FCS school, it can be reaching into a community that maybe is underrepresented at the academy, or that doesn't have institutional pipelines that lead to the academy, or ties. And so there's a lot of value there. The other thing is, now that we're in the American, truthfully, if we can handle our business in the American, we don't necessarily need a Power Five game or victory in order to get to a better bowl game, potentially even get to the college football playoff. I mean, last year, Liberty would have been in the college football playoff. They didn't sniff anything close to a P4 team. They had one of the worst schedules and they went undefeated. They would have been in the 12 team. In 2022, it was Tulane. It was a 2-loss team. They did have a P5 win, but they were also a 2-loss team. I mean, if we can handle our business in the American, we can get to the postseason that we're looking for without the P5. And while it is good for exposure and it is good for losing to Wisconsin by 1 touchdown is fantastic. Michigan in overtime and Oklahoma in overtime. This is fantastic. What happened to us last year at LSU, or Notre Dame in 2016, or Ohio State in 2017, or whatever year it was, that's not good for us. That doesn't help us with anything. So my take is to keep the FCS as opposed to the Power Four, but I may be wrong.
Wow, I did not see that coming at all when you asked the question. Oh man.
Well, and I mean, like, I say that because it's easy to say it because this is a podcast and none of this really matters. Because if you remember what Lehigh's mascot is, I'm probably, if you get down to brass tacks, I'm probably going to take the power opponent.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I mean, this is one of my wacky ideas that'll never be implemented. But I would actually like to see uh, Army's opening weekend opponent consistently not only be an FCS team, but um, actually go on the road. To I think the core would be happy about this because it would give them an actual long weekend on Labor Day weekend. Um, so and I try to care about them just as much as anybody. But yeah, I mean that is a proposal that I would put forward if I had any power whatsoever.
I mean, up until like the late 80s and 90s, like both Army and Navy were playing FCS teams on the road. Like you'll like stumble upon like some footage of like Navy playing at like Franklin Field. It's like kind of jarring, to be honest with you. Like it's kind of strange to see. You're like stumble upon like looking at Army schedule, Army at Harvard at Harvard, but I wouldn't be opposed to it. I just think the last time we went on the road to an FCS school just didn't end so well for us. And we stand to lose more than we gain, to be honest.
Was that Yale? You're talking
That
about
was
Yale?
Yeah.
I loved those unis though. Loved those unis. Icy.
Yeah. Oh, they were great. The gray unis were great. I think the gray unis back then were better than the ones we have now. The ones we have now aren't bad, but I think the gray unis, that the execution was perfect.
I also think Yale may have gotten a little home cooking chicanery that game, if I remember correctly. I want to say there was a field goal that didn't go Army's way that maybe should have. But anyway,
I mean, we're in better days now. So
If and if you're like, oh, that field goal should have if you needed the field goal to beat Yale, it's like you're already you've already lost.
yeah, Tyler Varga, darn Tyler Varga, great running back though, great running back. Following the great running back tradition of Yale backs, Calvin Hill, right, and everything. Clint Frank, Larry Kelly. Larry Kelly was a halfback that won the Heisman 37. So just had to mention more history. But talking about Power Fives, just getting back on track, talking about Power Fives. Something that Brendan added to our discussion was my notion that in Jeff Monken's best seasons, 2017 and 2018, namely, that we only have a signature loss. Even 2020, we'll throw 2020 in there since we went 9-3. And of course, my reasoning for that comes from just looking at our schedule, which I guess like 2018 is I guess the true one. 2017, I know you're about to counter that, Brendan. I mean, I always talk about this at work, talking about seeing a Daniel Jones. Whenever I want to talk about Army being a great program, talking about us shutting down the number 6 draft pick. I know it's coming. But yeah, like in 2017, we did lose to Ohio State on the road, but of course, I say this without thinking about Duke. 2018 is probably the most legitimate claim that I guess supports or legitimate evidence that supports my claim, with Army losing to Duke on the road and then losing to Oklahoma on the road, of course. And then I think the best win that we have that year is against Buffalo Mackey's champions, which is great. Anytime you beat a division champion at the FBS level, it's a great win. But I don't think too many Army fans are looking back at like, man, that 2018 Buffalo win was program defining. And that was a great team. That
yeah.
Buffalo team was great.
So I'll just say I think from a national point of view, I think you're right. I think Army gained way more publicity from taking Oklahoma to double overtime than probably any win they've had, except for maybe beating Air Force this past year. Um, but for those of us who are in the weeds, I'll actually take this back to 2016 because to me, um, that opening game against Temple that weekend, to me that's the hinge point of the entire program, because Temple was a team that, other than 2007 when they literally had players tackling each other inside Nike Stadium, um, that was a team that physically dominated Army, and yeah, like Temple themselves, they were kind of like on a comeback trail, but even still, it wasn't. I don't think they were necessarily even like a top 50 team in the country in those years, and they were just like absolutely road grading uh, Army whenever they played them. So that 2016 game, that 2016 win, a convincing win at Temple, to me is kind of the hinge point of the whole program. And Temple that year, they won 10 games the year before, and they won 10 games in 2016 as well. So I just wanted to bring that up. In terms of 2017, yeah, I mean, you pretty much have to wait till the end of the year playing San Diego State. Um, that was certainly a big deal at the time. I think San Diego State was like 10-2 going into that game, and there was a lot of talk. I don't think he ultimately got drafted as high as people necessarily thought during the game, but Rashad Penny certainly was a legit NFL prospect at the time. Um, so I would throw that in as a signature win. And also just like stylistically, I mean, that's sort of like the ultimate capstone of the Cardiac Cadets, uh, going for two, and then they ended up getting another touchdown on kind of an aborted what do you call it?
It was an attempt to do the Stanford lateral.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so they ended up getting another touchdown to make the score look a little bit bigger, but really it was just like a 1 point game. And then 2018, for me, I look at the weeks before and after Oklahoma, um, where they beat Hawaii at home. That's the only time Army has ever beaten Hawaii um, in program history was in 2018. And then the Buffalo game, and I'm slightly biased because I took a road trip up there and saw it in person, but that was another convincing win. And I mean, Buffalo did a lot of good things that season. I think Lance Leipold was in his third season, and certainly he's gone on to be one of the top quote unquote younger names in FBS coaching, FBS coaching in recent years. So I would count Hawaii and Buffalo as kind of an in the weeds signature win. And then you know 2021, obviously you have it's another bowl game. 2020, I would say the at UTSA where it was I might be mistaken, but I think it was Tyler and Ballard's. It was both of their debuts. Neither of them had taken a varsity snap, and they split time and won that game pretty handedly. So um, again, Omar, I think from a national perspective, you are absolutely correct. But um, I guess putting a microscope to it, those are the games I would mention as signature program wins. But I do think there's another peg that the program could reach on the wall um, in terms of a signature program win. Certainly for Jeff Monken. I mean if you want to say the Air Force win last year trumps all of those because it finally gets the AP ranking monkey off their back, then I would accept that. But I just wish it would have come in a slightly better season.
Well, you named a lot of the games that I had identified for this discussion. I think on an insider level, we have more signature wins than signature losses. I think on a national level, I think the perception may be that we have more signature losses. And I think that the numbers 1 and 1A in that are going to be our losses to Michigan and to Oklahoma. Nationally, I think probably our biggest wins are going to be over Mizzou in 2021, the bowl game, as you talked about earlier. And then probably 2018 when we dropped 70 on Houston in the Armed Forces Bowl. It was just an absolute beatdown. The problem with both of those is that they're bowl games, and bowl games, especially when they're not, if it's not a bowl game that has some gravitas to it, even outside what was the New Year's Six, but if it's not something that has some gravitas to it, there's a lot of look, and even in that Houston game, a lot of their starters didn't play, so it's easier to forget those moments. In terms of the insiders, what is a signature win? Absolutely the San Diego State, not just because that was the year that we finally won the CIC, not just because it was our second bowl game in a row, but it was the Cardiac Cadets, like you said, and also it was the quintessential Army is going to run the ball and eat clock. And I think we had the ball for 44 or 45 minutes of regulation. Yeah. And San Diego State had it for 14 minutes and change. And we still needed to go for 2 to assure victory. And then, of course, we had that wacky touchdown on the last play, just like you said. But apart from that, we've got a 7-point loss to Wisconsin that I just mentioned. We've got a 3-point loss to West Virginia that we talked about earlier, a game that I think was totally winnable if they had just left Christian Anderson in the game. That's for another podcast. And then, we are 11-4 in our last 14 CIC games. So if you want to talk about insider signature wins, go down the list. Army is the big brother of Navy and Air Force today. We haven't always been, we're not always going to be, but right now we are and have been for several years. And that is the signature for Jeff Monken right there. What do we need now? We need a national victory over a P5 team in a spotlight, maybe in a neutral field, maybe in a night game, maybe this year against the cursed Irish, arguably my least favorite team in college football. So once we get that, that will be the national signature win that I don't know if we have in the Monken era. We have lots and lots and lots of insider signature wins. Jeff Monken will go down as the greatest coach in Army football history. I have every confidence about that. We just need one to make the mouth breathers who keep saying that we're going to finish 6th in the AAC this year to go, hey, wait, Army, they play good ball. They play good ball. No kidding. So sorry. That's I'm soapboxing a little bit, but this was a fantastic topic, and I really got into the weeds in my research.
I'm a little hurt. I'm not gonna lie. As a lover of the history of college football, you'd say Notre Dame is your least favorite program, but I'll be fine. I think it's interesting you brought up the Houston game because even then, other like detractors bring up asterisks with Houston, right? We dropped 70 on them, but that's without Ed Oliver, generational defensive tackle talent. And let me just say here, 2018 Derek King probably would have been in New York had he not gotten hurt against Tulane in the penultimate game of the season. He had 50 touchdowns in 10 and a half games. It's realistic that before, I mean, of course, it's a year before Joe Burrow's golden 2019 season, but it's debatable that if Derek King finishes a whole season, that Derek King's 2018 for a brief moment in time is the gold standard of FBS quarterbacking. 50 touchdowns responsible in 10 and a half games. Of course, Houston was without him, but we still beat another future NFL draft pick, Clayton Tune. I mean, he's no slouch. Of course, I was freshman Clayton Tune, but we made him hate the troops that day. But I will say that, like, the 2018 Armed Forces Bowl is kind of a I guess, not deserved, but it's an explainable asterisk. But I definitely agree where it's like the Notre Dame game when we talk about Notre Dame, and I hope it's not an omen for the future if we beat them. Like with Paul Johnson, like the Notre Dame game in 2007 was Paul Johnson's magnum opus as Navy coach. That was like essentially the peak of that rebuild, what I feel like, beating Notre Dame in that game, breaking the streak. Of course, Army has their own streak, is not as many games, but Dwight D. Eisenhower was president the last time that we beat Notre Dame. So, I mean, that's that. Not a lot of people know that, but again, it would be a huge game, of course, prime time on NBC and everything, like with all the promotional juices and everything flowing. You know that the poetry will be rich, the prose will be amazing, talking about the 100th anniversary of the Four Horsemen, the most famous piece of college football literature. But I mean, but yeah, like I have no notes, nothing to add really. Before our last topic, I mean, I guess to cap off the show, Brandon wanted to bring up an incident that happened on good old X regarding the Star
Yeah,
Series. So I'll just let you have the floor.
yeah, and I'll make this as brief as I can because I really don't want to dwell on this, but I just want to make a point for social media managers out there. So I don't know, some time ago earlier this summer, it wasn't even, I don't think it was even from the official Navy account, but it was an RT that I responded to. Navy was bragging about how they won the Star Series again and blah 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 blah. And all I said was that Army doesn't care about the Star Series, which is, from what I can gather from the people that I talk to, is a true statement. So you could like So like all of you weirdo Navy fans can try to tell me like, oh, I'm just like trying to down all the copium that I can. I'm just letting you know, like, you know, from my perspective, what the feelings are. But more than that, I'm just a guy, okay? Like, you know, because ultimately the Navy Athletics, the official Navy Athletics Twitter, retweeted me and tried to dunk on me as if um, you know, I was working for the Times Herald or something like that. And it's like, no, like I don't work for a newspaper. I'm not Sal. I'm not as for football, even though like I, you know, I'll just like give them topics sometimes that they happen to use. Like, I'm not anybody official. I'm just a guy. So, um, yeah, don't do that. It's I could I you know don't tweet people who are just people. You know, to me it's a classless look, and you know, certainly if the official Army account retweeted anything at all from Navy Daddy 69, I would say, guys, what are you doing? Like, be better than this. So that's
You're
all I have
selling
to say
yourself
about that.
short, Brendan. You're selling yourself short. You're a tastemaker. All right. You are the pinnacle of Army social media. All right. Squeezed in between your movie posters and James Bond tweets. All right. You're dunking on Navy and their interest in the Star Series. Clearly, you underestimate your reach, my friend.
I guess so. I don't know. I just found the whole thing very strange.
Well, with that, I mean, I guess in the future, just be wary of the Navy Athletics, Navy Athletic, I guess, official Twitter page. Even though they got some nice folks, I've had many a great interaction with Scott Strassmeyer of the Naval Athletics Department, one of their lead SIDs. I will say that, but yeah, like I guess just in the future, ELE, everybody love everybody. Even if it's your rival, in the words of good old Jackie Moon, Flint Tropics. Before we finish, gents, do we have anything you want to add slash promote? As you say, Cuthbert, shameless promotion is promotion, or shameless promotion isn't shameless. So I'll let you guys have the floor before we close out.
No, it's that shameless promotion is shameless, and that's what makes it so shameless. Um, yeah, so I'm just going to say that I'm working on a big project right now for in preparation for the season. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. If I'm going to do some kind of like solo podcast, or maybe like some podcast with these two jamokes, or maybe like do like a massive Twitter thread, or like reactivate a website that I used to have up and running like 2 years ago. I don't know what it is, but the long and the short is I'm doing an incredible deep dive into the Army season and all of our opponents. And I'm going to create some sort of massive something. It's like you can see my crazy notes. I'm already going all in. I'm going deep on positions and on returning starters and things like that. And it's driving my wife crazy. And I'm gonna do something with it, and I don't know what, but stay on the lookout for it because I'm gonna be promoting it through SSN Army as well as my personal account. I'm probably gonna rope these two jokers into it, and yeah, it'll be something. So go Army, beat Navy. Thanks again, Omar. This is always a blast, and seeing you and Brendan.
I won't plug anything personally this time, but I'll just say that Army hockey just put out their schedule within the past couple weeks, and it's a pretty fun looking schedule, both home and away, especially non conference. They actually looks like they actually have a date with Penn State at home, which is a pretty big deal, and a couple home dates at the end of December with Princeton and Vermont, which is I've definitely seen Princeton on the schedule before, but I don't know about Vermont. So yeah, definitely if you've never been to an Army hockey game, definitely get up there once in your life. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of just like local fans from the Hudson Valley who come out and like that's their thing. And the thing about Tate Rink is Uh, it's it's like the first row is probably like at least 6 feet up from the ice, so there's not too many bad seats in the house. Like you can pretty much follow the whole action from wherever you are. So yeah, I just want to give them a plug. They've had they've had a few rough years, but man, I mean that season going right into COVID, it might have been the one. So I still have the poster from that season.
Yeah, I mean, I never went to I mean, I guess I'm sad to say I never went to a hockey game in my time at the academy. I mean, shame on me. Hockey's never been my cup of tea. But maybe one day, maybe there will be one day where I do go to Tate Rink finally when I can drive and I don't have to walk from the barracks to Tate Rink. So and waste 20 minutes of time, or 40 minutes round trip. But thank you, gentlemen, for joining. Really enjoyed this as always, and can't wait for the next time. And for everyone watching, thank you again. Hope you guys learned something, gained some new perspective on the Army football program. And until next time, everyone, peace, love, and soul, the Burger Popper.